In this lesson, you will learn several core techniques for controlling the perimeter length of a haircut. We will focus on hand, body, and scissor positioning, which will in turn produce the results you need for excellent one-length hair. Our goal is to clarify one-length cutting techniques so we understand how to manage length efficiently. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to separate the hair from the top of the head to behind the ear. That way we're managing the length separately from the front and the back. The back is a very different topography than the front, so we really want to focus on what it means to cut the back differently and separately than what it means to transition from the back to the front. So from here I'm going to take a vertical section down the center back and then a horizontal section below the occipital bone. Now when cutting this initial section, I want you to think about how much hair you can manage. When we look at the sections we're dealing with, it's all about what is manageable to me as a hairdresser. So if the hair is very dense and very coarse, I might take finer sections so that way I can deal with more precision cutting. If the hair is a little more finer and less coarse and a little less dense, I can take larger sections and work with cutting that length. It also depends on what my outcome is. If I want a blunter line, I'll take smaller sections. And if I want a softer line, it's okay for me to take broader or wider sections. So what we're going to first do is work with very minimal tension with the head tilted forward. So when that head is tilted forward, we can deal with the underside of the length first, because there are two aspects of length. There is the underside of length and then the surface of length. So here we're going to work from the inside out. I'm using the wide teeth of my comb, so there's very minimal tension on the hair. And as you'll notice when I'm working, I'm rotating the comb around the neck so that there's very minimal elevation as I'm cutting. And I'm working from the inside to the corner and then the inside of the corner. So that way I'm really making a consistent line from start to finish. I don't want to work one way on one side and then that same way on the other. Then I end up getting different variations in that perimeter length. So as I continue to work up the hair with the head tilted forward, I'm going to again take a horizontal section, enough hair for me to manage, and then I'm going to comb that down using the wide teeth of my comb. And I want to explore different variations of cutting one length. We can cut it all with a blunt haircut, cutting consistently from the inside out. Or if I want to, I can cut a little softer, cutting above my fingers, not using a lot of tension, but creating that nice soft line. So instead of creating a blunt line, I can cut it softly using the tips or the sides of my shears to remove that initial length. But even though I'm cutting above my fingers, I'm still going to work from the inside out to really help maintain the length of the corner as it transitions from the back to the front. So then finally, my last option as I look at this is I can use minimal tension and then just press the hair into the comb, working from the inside out, pressing softly, trying to keep as little tension as possible using the tips of my shear to cut a blunt line. So it gives me three different variations of choice when cutting length. The first one using the wide teeth of the comb, using that as a brace to hold the hair in place. I can cut above my fingers to create a softer line, or if I want to, I can cut a blunter line working from the inside out using the comb, making sure not to use too much tension, because when that hair dries it's going to shrink up, and I'm always going to want to refine it anyway when it's finished, because as much as I love technique on wet cutting, it's also important to understand that the dry haircut is really where we see the hair in its true form. As I transition from the back to the front, I'm going to take a horizontal section that's enough hair for me to manage, and then I'm going to clip that initial hair out of the way that I'm not going to be cutting, so that way I can see the hair very clearly. Now when cutting the side, you'll notice I've taken the mannequin head and I've turned the head over, up, and back. In a lot of our video series when we're working on human beings, you're going to see that I'm really working this in a very realistic way. But for our time now, when we're working with our mannequin head, we just want to imagine the head going over, up, and back so that we really expose that corner. Now, our mannequin heads don't have shoulders or bodies, so we're really working in a very unrealistic way when we understand these techniques. And at the same time, we really want to understand how the techniques live, so we understand how they translate on real people. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue to work from the inside out. Now, I want to maintain very little tension with that comb, so I'm really just going to very softly cut. And as you'll notice when I'm cutting, I'm sort of pulling away a little bit as I cut, so I'm not pushing through that hair to build more length in the front. I really do want to create a corner in that front, but I don't want to get it longer, so I'm making sure to really manage that length very clearly. And as I work with this, another option is for me to just delicately hold the hair, so I'm creating as little tension as possible, because that ear has sometimes the ability to push the hair out, and then the hair will jump up and you'll get a hole around that area. So I want there to be as little tension as possible when I'm working through here. So I'm going to continue to take horizontal sections, working my way up the hair with the head tilted over, up, and back. And then we're going to explore even less tension, where I'm just letting the hair fall into gravity. And I'm cutting from shorter to longer from the inside out, connecting that corner from the back into that corner to the side. And as I work with this, I can choose to use the comb to hold the hair in place. But ultimately, what I'm really looking at when managing this length is working with as little tension as possible, especially if I'm working in a more precise way. And then as I continue to work, I'm just positioning the comb in with the scissor, so that way I can manage that length, knowing full well that when it's dry, I'll refine it and make it a better version of what it is when it's wet. Because wet cutting, in essence, is just a theory. It's a, I think this will happen. We don't really know what the hair looks like until it's completely dry and until the hair is smooth and straight, for us to really look at where the length is, where the density is, and what the texture is. So as I continue to work from the inside out on both sides, working either using a backhand cutting technique where I'm cutting from the inside out, working my way to the front on the left or the right side, so that way there's consistency as we're working with this length of hair. So in conclusion, what we've looked at is 3 ways in which to manage length of hair. Now, our mannequin heads are missing essential anatomy that make it very realistic, but we're really just focused on technique. And the technique is to understand how to cut from the inside of the hair out, how to minimize our tension, and how to work with the underside of the length as well as the surface of the length, making sure that that head is tilted forward, and also how we transition from the back to the front, so that way the shoulders aren't in the way and we get to expose that corner to connect to that front length.